The stars looked different from the bridge of the Tenacity. Captain De Jong had been staring at them for 3 months now, watching as his ship pushed deeper into unexplored space than any human vessel had gone before. Earth was 50 light years behind them, connected only by quantum messages that took days to send and receive. His crew of 47 people represented humanity's best. Engineers, scientists, soldiers, and explorers, all working together to map the galaxy beyond the local bubble. They had discovered 6 new star systems, cataloged dozens of planets, and found exactly 0 signs of intelligent life. De Jong was starting to think humans might be alone in the universe. Then everything changed. Hannah noticed it first. She was the chief engineer, a woman who understood machines better than people. She had been running routine scans near the Veil Nebula when her instruments went crazy. Energy readings spiked across every spectrum. Something massive was out there, hidden in the cosmic dust. De Jong ordered the ship closer. What they found made everyone on the bridge fall silent. It was a structure, artificial and enormous. A ring of dark metal floating in space, 50 kilometers across. Strange symbols covered its surface, glowing faintly with blue light. The design was nothing like human technology. Smooth curves and impossible angles that seemed to shift when you looked at them too long. Hannah couldn't help herself. She was a scientist at heart. While De Jong was still deciding what to do, she launched a probe to scan the structure. The probe got within 100 meters before something happened. The symbols on the ring flared bright. Energy pulsed outward in waves. The ring began to spin, faster and faster, until the center filled with swirling light. The Tenacity sensors screamed warnings. Space itself was tearing open inside the ring. It was a doorway, a tunnel through reality to somewhere else. Hannah had accidentally activated an alien gate. Before De Jong could order a retreat, ships started coming through. Not 1 or 2, but dozens. Sleek vessels made of materials that seemed to absorb light. They moved with impossible grace, surrounding the Tenacity in perfect formation. De Jong's hand moved to the weapons console, but he stopped. These ships could have destroyed them already if they wanted to. This was a greeting, not an attack. A message came through on every frequency at once. It translated itself automatically into perfect Korean, English, Mandarin, and a dozen other Earth languages. The voice was calm and formal. Greetings, unknown species. We are representatives of the Galactic Council. Please do not be alarmed. We come in peace and friendship. The next few hours passed in a blur. The aliens introduced themselves. Ambassador Voth spoke for the Kryn hierarchy, a species that looked like they were carved from living crystal. Counselor Thelm represented the Orvanti collective, beings made of something that shifted between solid and liquid. They explained that the gate network connected thousands of worlds across the galaxy. The Galactic Council had maintained peace and prosperity for 40,000 years. Earth, they said, had been noticed. Humanity's expansion into space had not gone unobserved. The Council was impressed by how quickly humans had developed. They wanted to offer Earth a place in the galactic community. It was an honor, they insisted. Only species that showed promise were invited to join. De Jong sent an urgent message back to Earth. Within 2 days, a response came from Premier Hyan Wu himself. Earth accepted the invitation. A formal delegation would arrive within the month to discuss terms. The meeting took place on Nexus Prime, the Council's capital world. It was a planet that shouldn't exist. Gravity was perfectly calibrated. The atmosphere was ideal for hundreds of different species. Massive cities floated in the sky, connected by bridges of solid light. Premier Hyan Wu stood in the Grand Assembly Hall, surrounded by representatives from 847 different species. He felt very small and very human. The Council presented the Accords of Integration. It was a document 3,000 pages long, written in legal language so complex that even the translators struggled. Premier Haiyan Wu's advisors spent 3 days reviewing it. Everything seemed reasonable. Earth would join as a probationary member. Humanity would gain access to the Gate network, trade with other species, and share in the protection of Council space. In return, Earth agreed to follow Council laws and submit to oversight during the probationary period. It seemed like a fair deal. Premier Haiyan Wu signed the document with hope in his heart. Humanity was no longer alone in the universe. They had friends now, allies who had survived for 40 millennia. Surely, humans could learn from them. But not everyone was celebrating. Ji Wu worked at the Lunar Research Institute, tucked away in underground tunnels beneath the moon's surface. She was a physicist specializing in quantum mechanics and information theory. The Council had provided humanity with access to their public databases as a welcoming gift. Millions of files containing basic information about galactic civilization. Ji Wu was reading through technical specifications when she noticed something strange. The accords that Premier Haiyan Wu had signed were included in the database, but the version there was different. It contained additional sections written in a language the translators hadn't caught. She ran it through her own translation algorithms, ones designed to break down quantum encrypted data. What she found made her blood run cold. The hidden clauses were restrictions, severe ones. Humanity was forbidden from settling in 78% of mapped space. Those regions were reserved for Council use. Humans could only develop technologies on an approved list. Anything not specifically permitted was prohibited by default. Earth was required to provide 40% of all resources they extracted as Council dues. Any military vessels had to be registered and could not exceed certain size limitations. The list went on and on. Each restriction was carefully worded to sound reasonable in isolation, but together they formed a cage. Humanity had signed away their freedom without realizing it. Ji Wu dug deeper into the databases. She found records of other species, the 847 members of the Council. Every single one had signed similar accords. Every single one was restricted, controlled, and monitored. She found economic data showing that most species had not advanced technologically in thousands of years. They were stagnant, frozen at whatever level they had reached when they joined. The Galactic Council wasn't a federation of equals. It was a control system designed to keep every species weak and dependent. And humanity had just walked right into it. Ji Wu knew she had to tell someone. She sent her findings to the one person she thought might listen. Captain De Jong was still out in space, exploring new systems with the tenacity. He had always been skeptical of things that seemed too good to be true. When he received her encrypted message, he spent 2 days reviewing her evidence. Then he made a decision that would change everything. He didn't report Ji Wu's findings to Earth Command. Not yet. Instead, he started investigating on his own. He talked to other species when he visited Council stations. He asked careful questions and listened to what people didn't say as much as what they did. Slowly, a picture emerged. The Council maintained peace by making sure no one could ever threaten the founding species. The 5 races that had created the Council 40,000 years ago still held all real power. Every other species existed at their mercy. It was peace through domination, prosperity through submission. Yang sent a message back to Ji Wu. Just 3 words. We have to act. 2 years passed since humanity joined the Galactic Council. Earth had changed in ways that made Yang uncomfortable every time he visited home. Council advisors were everywhere now. They sat in government meetings, observed military exercises, and reviewed every new research project. They called it assistance. Liu Gyung called it surveillance. The restrictions were getting worse. Human colonies on Mars and Europa had been thriving pushing the boundaries of terraforming technology. Then the Council stepped in. The terraforming methods humans were developing were deemed too aggressive. They had to switch to Council-approved techniques that worked 10 times slower. When engineers protested, the Council advisors smiled politely and reminded everyone of the accords they had signed. Su Jin saw it all from her position on Nexus Prime. She served as Earth's official Council representative, spending her days in endless meetings and diplomatic receptions. The job had seemed glamorous at first. Now she understood it was mostly about learning when to stay quiet. The Council operated through a system so complex it took her months to understand even the basics. Nothing was ever decided by simple votes. Instead, everything ran on favors, debts, and ancient agreements between species. The 5 founding races held permanent seats with veto power. The Kryn, Orvanti, Velfine, Kor, and Nethruk made whole real decisions behind closed doors. Everyone else just performed the theater of democracy in the Grand Assembly. Su-Jin attended a session where a species called the Tolmec proposed building a new gate hub in their home system. They presented economic data, environmental studies, and proof they could manage the construction. The proposal was perfect. It still got rejected. Later, over drinks at a diplomatic reception, an Orvanti counselor explained why. The Tolmec had supported the wrong. Side in a trade dispute 300 years ago. The founding species had long memories. Meanwhile, on New Jeju, Governor Taeyang was dealing with a more immediate crisis. His colony had been established 5 years ago on a beautiful world with deep oceans and rich mineral deposits. Human settlers had built thriving cities and started families. They had found something special on New Jeju, a new element in the planet's crust that could revolutionize energy production. Then the Council arrived. They didn't ask. They demanded. The element, which human scientists had named Jeju 7, was now classified as a restricted resource under Section 47 of the Accords. All mining operations had to cease immediately. Extraction rights would be transferred to a Council-approved corporation. New Jeju would receive a small percentage as compensation. Taeyang refused. He sent formal protests through proper channels. He cited Earth's mineral rights and colony establishment laws. He tried everything by the book. The Council's response was simple. 3 enforcer ships appeared in orbit around New Jeju, massive vessels bristling with weapons that could turn the planet's surface into glass. A message came from the lead ship. The Council was willing to discuss terms, but only after Taeyang complied with their initial demand. Taeyang stood on the balcony of his office, watching the enforcer ships drift across the sky like dark omens. His people looked to him for protection. The Council had made their message clear: obey or face consequences. He felt helpless, angry, and trapped. Back on Earth, Hana was working on something that might change everything. After Jiwoo's discoveries 2 years ago, a secret project had been authorized at the highest levels. Not through official channels where Council advisors might notice, but through back channels and classified funding. Deep beneath the Gobi Desert, Hana led a team of 70 researchers in an underground facility that officially didn't exist. They were developing new technology, but being very careful about it. The Council's restrictions were specific. Humans couldn't develop certain types of engines, weapons, or computers. But the restrictions were based on the Council's understanding of physics. They assumed everyone would develop technology the same way they had. Hana's team was proving them wrong. While the Council used quantum mechanics for their propulsion systems, humans had stumbled onto something different. During early experiments with dimensional folding, a researcher named Quan had noticed anomalies. Space didn't just bend in the ways quantum physics predicted. There were adjacent dimensions, thin layers of reality that the Council's equations didn't account for. Quan's discovery led to the slip drive. It didn't work like Council Gate technology. Instead of tearing holes in space, it slipped ships sideways into an adjacent dimension where the laws of physics were slightly different. Ships could move faster there, then slip back into normal space somewhere else. It was slower than the gate network, but it had one massive advantage. The Council couldn't detect it. Their sensors were designed to watch for quantum signatures. Slip space left almost no trace. The first test happened on a Tuesday morning. Hana watched nervously as a small probe activated its slip drive and vanished. For 10 seconds, nothing happened. Then the probe reappeared exactly where the calculations predicted, 50,000 kilometers away. The team erupted in celebration. They had done it. Humanity now had a way to travel that the Council didn't control. Dae-Jung, now promoted to Admiral, received the news while his fleet was patrolling near the Orion Spur. He immediately understood what this meant. He began quietly retrofitting ships with slip drives, claiming the modifications were routine maintenance. Within 6 months, he had 15 vessels that could move freely without using Council gates. He used them to do something the Council had forbidden. He explored the prohibited zones, the 78% of space that was off limits to humanity. The Council claimed these areas were environmentally sensitive or reserved for scientific study. Jiu suspected the truth was different. His suspicions were confirmed on the third expedition. His ships found a dead world in a system the Council charts marked as protected wilderness. The planet's surface was covered in ruins. Not ancient ruins worn by time, but recent destruction. Cities that had been leveled, forests that had been burned, oceans that had been boiled away. Someone had committed genocide here, and not long ago, Dachi Wu analyzed the data they brought back. She compared it with Council historical records and found references to a species called the Mtari. They had been Council members 300 years ago. Then they had vanished from the records with no explanation. The official story was they had gone extinct due to a plague. But the ruins told a different story. This was military destruction, systematic and thorough. More expeditions found more dead worlds. 8 in total, all in prohibited zones. 8 species that had been erased from existence. Ji Wu dug through the Council databases looking for patterns. She found them. Each species had shown signs of developing beyond their assigned limitations. The Mtari had been working on advanced AI. The Corvin had been researching weapons that could disrupt gate technology. The Gel had been forming political alliances that threatened Council authority. Each time a species stepped too far out of line, they disappeared. The Council didn't announce it. They didn't put it to a vote. The founding species simply acted, then rewrote history to erase what they had done. It was a secret kept through 40,000 years of carefully managed information control. Su-Jin learned the truth in the worst possible way. She was attending a diplomatic reception when a minor Orvanti official had too much to drink. He pulled her aside and, thinking he was being friendly, warned her. Earth was being watched carefully, he said. Some counselors thought humans were advancing too quickly, becoming too independent. There were discussions happening at high levels. Discussions about whether humanity was becoming a problem that needed to be solved. The official seemed to think he was doing Su-Jin a favor by warning her. All she had to do was make sure Earth stayed obedient and everything would be fine. He smiled as he said it, completely unaware he had just revealed that the Council was considering exterminating her entire species. Su-Jin maintained her diplomatic composure until she returned to her quarters. Then she sent an encrypted message to Premier Haiyan Wu. 3 words. They killed dissenters. On New Juju, Taeyang made his decision. The enforcer ships were still in orbit, waiting for his compliance. He sent them a message. New Jeju would need 3 days to shut down mining operations safely. The Council agreed, pleased that the humans were being reasonable. During those 3 days, Taeyang evacuated everyone who wanted to leave. Ships carried civilians to other colonies, moving constantly to avoid suspicion. When the 3 days were up, New Jeju was empty except for Taeyang and his skeleton crew. They destroyed the mining equipment, collapsed the tunnels, and scattered false data to make the deposits seem smaller than they were. Then they left. The council took control of an empty world with useless mines. It was a small victory, but it felt good. Taeyang joined Dae-young's fleet, bringing with him detailed records of everything the council had done to his colony. The evidence was mounting. The council wasn't what it claimed to be. It was a control system maintained through surveillance, manipulation, and when necessary, genocide. And humanity was next on their list. The council made their move on a Wednesday morning Earth Standard Time. It started with an announcement broadcast across every human colony simultaneously. The message came from the Grand Assembly itself, signed by all 5 founding species. Humanity stood accused of violating the Accords of Integration. The charges were serious. Unauthorized technology development, unauthorized exploration of restricted space, failure to comply with resource allocation requirements. Each violation was documented with evidence that looked damning. Of course, the council had fabricated most of it. Dae-young's secret explorations had been discovered, but the council added crimes humanity had never committed to make their case stronger. Premier Hyan-woo received a formal summons. He was required to appear before the full council assembly within 7 days to answer the charges. The message was polite, but the threat was clear. Come and submit to council judgment, or Earth would be declared a rogue civilization. Su-jin explained what that meant when Hyan-woo asked. Rogue civilizations lost all protection under council law. Any member species could attack them without consequences. Their worlds could be claimed, their people enslaved or eliminated. The council had used this classification 23 times in their history. None of those species survived. It was a trap perfectly designed to force humanity's surrender. Show up and accept whatever punishment the council demanded, or refuse and give them legal justification to destroy Earth. Either way, the council won. Premier Hyan-woo made the journey to Nexus Prime, knowing he was walking into an execution chamber. The Grand Assembly Hall was packed. Representatives from 847 species filled the viewing galleries. Cameras broadcast the proceedings to billions of beings across the galaxy. This was meant to be a public humiliation, a reminder of what happened to species that defied council authority. Councillor Thelm presented the case for the prosecution. His liquid form shifted colors as he spoke, displaying images of Daeun's fleet in restricted zones, ships equipped with unauthorized technology, human colonies that had refused council oversight. The evidence seemed overwhelming. Thelm's conclusion was simple. Humanity had violated the Accords. They must surrender all space-capable vessels, submit to permanent council occupation, and accept whatever penalties the council deemed appropriate. Ambassador Voth added his voice to the demands. The Kryn had always been the most aggressive of the founding species. He wanted Earth's gate access revoked permanently. He wanted human colonies disbanded. He wanted humanity confined to their home system for the next 1,000 years as punishment for their arrogance. Premier Hyan-woo stood alone at the defendant's platform, surrounded by hostile alien faces. He had prepared a speech, carefully worded to defend humanity's actions while not provoking the council further. He opened his mouth to begin. Then every screen in the Grand Assembly changed. Dae-jung's face appeared on displays across the hall, across Nexus Prime, across every council world connected to the broadcast network. His fleet had been waiting for this moment. They didn't attack. They did something smarter. They released the truth. Ji-woo had spent 2 years compiling evidence. Now it poured out for everyone to see. Images of dead worlds in prohibited zones, council records showing species that had been erased from history, internal communications between founding species discussing which civilizations were becoming problematic, financial data proving the council extracted far more resources than they claimed, technical specifications showing the founding species hoarded advanced technology while forcing everyone else to use inferior versions. The most damning evidence came last. Ji Wu had found the Council's contingency plans for humanity, detailed strategies for engineering humanity's destruction. They would start with economic isolation, cutting off Earth from trade and resources. Then they would encourage conflicts with neighboring species, making humanity spend their strength fighting meaningless wars. Finally, if humans still refused to submit, the founding species would use their military forces to sterilize every human world dot. It was all there, documented in the Council's own files. 40,000 years of manipulation, control, and genocide exposed in 15 minutes of brutal truth. The Grand Assembly erupted into chaos. Species that had lived under Council control their entire existence suddenly understood they were prisoners, not partners. Representatives shouted questions, demands, accusations. The founding species tried to restore order, but their authority was crumbling by the second. Then Hannah's engineering teams activated the second part of humanity's plan. Across the galaxy, automated transmitters began broadcasting on every frequency. They were sending out blueprints, complete technical specifications for the slip drive. Humanity was giving away the technology that freed them from Council control. Any species that wanted it could now build their own vessels that moved outside the gate. Network. It was the Council's worst nightmare. For 40,000 years, they had maintained power by controlling transportation and communication. The gate network was their monopoly. Now that monopoly was broken. Any species could move freely, communicate secretly, develop independently. The chains that had held the galaxy in place for millennia were shattering. Ambassador Voth's crystalline form flared with rage. He called for an emergency session of the founding species. Within the hour, they had voted unanimously. Earth must be destroyed immediately, before this rebellion spread further. Make an example so terrible that no other species would dare follow humanity's path. The Council mobilized the largest military fleet in recorded history. 50,000 warships drawn from all 5 founding species. Vessels carrying weapons that could crack planets, scatter atmospheres into space, turn entire star systems into dead zones. The fleet set course for Earth. Every human colony received the warning. They had 6 days before the Council fleet arrived. 6 days to prepare for extinction. Dae-Jung gathered his forces. He had 63 ships equipped with slip drives. Against 50,000, it wasn't even a fight. But humans had never been good at accepting impossible odds. He sent out a message to every military vessel and armed civilian ship in human space. Come to Earth. Stand together. If they were going to die, they would die proving humanity would never surrender. Tae-Young took command of the defense fleet gathering around Earth. He knew they couldn't win through conventional warfare. Human weapons were decent, but the Council had 40,000 years of military development. Their shields were stronger, their weapons hit harder, their ships were faster. In a straight fight, the human fleet would be destroyed in minutes. So they wouldn't fight straight. Humans had spent their entire existence finding clever ways to beat stronger opponents. Tae-Young started planning tactics the Council would never expect because they violated every rule of civilized warfare. While military forces prepared, billions of civilians on Earth retreated into underground shelters. The excavations had begun secretly 2 years ago when humanity first learned the truth about the Council. Now those shelters would be tested. People descended into tunnels kilometers beneath the surface, carrying what they could, leaving behind homes and cities that might not exist in a week. The Council fleet arrived exactly on schedule. 50,000 warships emerged from the gate network in perfect formation. They surrounded Earth, weapons charged, shields active. This was meant to be overwhelming, a demonstration that resistance was futile. Admiral Voth broadcast one final demand: surrender immediately, and some humans would be permitted to survive as a subject species. Refuse, and every man, woman, and child would die. Premier Hyun Woo stood in the command center deep beneath the Himalayas. Around him, the leaders of humanity watched displays showing the Council fleet. So many ships, so much power. It seemed impossible to fight. Hyun Woo gave the order anyway. Two words that would define humanity's place in the galaxy: engage them. Taeyong's fleet dropped the pretense of conventional tactics immediately. Ships equipped with slip drives appeared throughout the Council formation in unpredictable patterns, not attacking the warships directly, but targeting support vessels. Communication relays, supply transports, gate tether ships that kept the fleet coordinated with the network. Human vessels would appear, fire everything they had, then slip away before the Council could respond. It was chaos. The Council fleet was designed for organized warfare between civilizations that followed the same rules. They relied on centralized command, coordinated movements, predictable battle lines. Humans ignored all of it. They fought like pirates, guerrillas, terrorists. Hit and run. Strike and fade. Create confusion and exploit it. The Council adapted, but slowly. Their command structure was too rigid. Decisions had to flow up through chains of command, get approved, then flow back down. By the time orders reached individual ships, the tactical situation had changed. Frustrated Council captains started acting independently, which only created more chaos. Then orbital bombardment began. Council warships in Earth's orbit fired on the surface. The first strikes vaporized entire cities. New York disappeared in nuclear fire. Tokyo became a crater. Mumbai, Cairo, Moscow, Mexico City, all gone in flashes of light. Billions died in the first 30 minutes, but the shelters held. Humanity had learned from the dead species Ji Woo discovered. They had studied how the Council destroyed civilizations and prepared accordingly. The bombardment killed everyone who stayed on the surface, but the underground population survived, waiting in darkness while their world burned above them. The battle lasted 3 days. Human ships fought desperately, knowing every minute they delayed was another minute for Earth's survivors to dig deeper, hide better, hope harder. The Council fleet lost 6,000 vessels, casualties they hadn't expected against what should have been an easy target. But human losses were worse. 90% of their fleet was destroyed. Then something happened the Council didn't anticipate. Other species joined the fight. The Tolmec, still angry about their rejected Gate Hub proposal, emerged from slipspace with 400 ships. The Rheses, tired of Council resource extraction from their worlds, brought 600 more. Species that had been quietly building slip-drive vessels from humanity's blueprints revealed themselves. Angry and armed. The rebellion humanity sparked 3 days ago had grown into a galactic uprising. 200 species declared independence from the Council. Ships appeared around Earth not to destroy it, but to defend it. The Council fleet suddenly faced a very different battle. Ambassador Voth made the calculation that the founding species were facing potential defeat for the first time in 40 millennia. He ordered the fleet to withdraw. Not a retreat, he insisted. A strategic repositioning to defend core Council worlds. But everyone knew the truth. The Council had lost. The battle for Earth ended not with victory, but with survival. The planet's surface was devastated. Billions were dead. But humanity and their allies had proven something important. The Council could be fought. The Council could bleed. The Council could lose. The galaxy had never been so chaotic. In the 6 months following Earth's survival, the Galactic Council fractured into pieces. Over 200 species declared independence, refusing to recognize Council authority. The Gate Network, once controlled entirely by the founding species, became contested territory, with battles erupting at major hubs. Some regions descended into violence immediately. The Corvin and the Thress had been enemies before the Council forced peace between them. Now, free from Council oversight, they went to war with enthusiasm. Old grudges suppressed for centuries exploded into orbital bombardments and system-wide conflicts. Dozens of other species followed similar patterns. Settling ancient debts with modern weapons. Earth was struggling to survive. The orbital bombardment had destroyed every major city on the surface. Reconstruction would take decades, maybe centuries. Humanity's population had been reduced from 10 billion to 3 billion in a single battle. The survivors lived underground, rationing supplies, trying to figure out what came next. Su Jin was working 18-hour days trying to organize something resembling galactic cooperation. She had moved her operations to Luna, which had survived the battle intact. Representatives from freed species arrived daily, all wanting to talk about the future. Some wanted military alliances. Others wanted trade agreements. A few just wanted someone to tell them what to do now that the Council wasn't giving orders anymore. She was attempting to create a new confederation, something voluntary instead of enforced. The idea was simple. Species would cooperate because it benefited them, not because they feared punishment. But simple ideas were hard to implement. Every species had different priorities, different cultures, different levels of trust in their neighbors. The preliminary meetings were held in a converted mining facility on Luna's far side. 40 species sent representatives. They spent the first week arguing about what to call themselves. Humans suggested the Free Species Alliance. The Tolmec wanted the Independent Worlds Coalition. The Rhesus insisted on the Confederation of Liberated Civilizations. Eventually, they settled on the Accord of Free Sentience, which everyone found acceptable because it was vague enough to mean whatever each species wanted it to mean. The real work came when they tried to write governing principles. Every species wanted freedom, but they also wanted security. They wanted independence, but they also wanted cooperation. Finding the balance was exhausting. Su Jin mediated debates that lasted days. Arguments that got so heated translators had to be adjusted because the insults were breaking the software. Meanwhile, Ji Wu had made a discovery that changed everything. She was still working on Luna, but now she had access to Council archives that had been sealed for millennia. One of the freed species, the Velthine, had provided passwords to restricted databases as thanks for humanity's role in the liberation. What Ji Wu found in those archives was terrifying. The Council hadn't been created to oppress civilizations. At least, not originally. 40,000 years ago, there had been a war that nearly destroyed the galaxy. A species called the Architects had developed technology so advanced it bordered on magic. They could manipulate reality itself, rewriting the laws of physics in localized areas. They decided to remake the galaxy according to their vision of perfection. Other species fought back. The war lasted 300 years and killed trillions. Entire sectors of space became uninhabitable. Some regions still bore scars from weapons that had bent reality so badly it never fully recovered. Eventually, the surviving species defeated the Architects, but the cost had been almost everything. The founders of the Council were survivors of that war. The Kryn, Orvanti, Velthine, Kor, and Nethrak had fought together against the Architects. When peace finally came, they made a decision. Never again. Never again would any species develop technology that could threaten existence itself. Never again would the galaxy risk destruction through unchecked advancement. So they built the Council. They created the Gate Network to control transportation. They imposed restrictions on technology, to prevent dangerous research. They monitored every species, suppressing any that showed signs of following the architect's path. The system was brutal and unfair, but it had prevented another existential war for 40,000 years. Ji Wu presented her findings to Su Jin and the other human leaders. The implications were obvious. By breaking the Council's control, humanity had removed the safeguards that prevented species from developing reality-destroying weapons. The freedom they had fought for came with a terrible price. The fear became reality faster than anyone expected. A species called the Quolith had been suppressed by the Council for 12,000 years. They were brilliant researchers who had always chafed under technology restrictions. Now free, they immediately resumed forbidden research. Within 3 months, they announced a breakthrough in spatial manipulation technology. They called it the Fold Engine. It could compress space itself, allowing instant transportation across any distance. The Quolith were proud of their achievement. They had proven the Council wrong about what was safe to develop. They scheduled a public demonstration. A demonstration took place in an uninhabited star system. Observers from dozens of species watched from safe distance. The Quolith activated their Fold Engine at full power, compressing a cubic kilometer of space down to the size of a marble. Something went wrong. The compressed space became unstable. Instead of expanding back to normal, it collapsed further, creating a microscopic singularity. The singularity didn't evaporate as the Quolith's calculations predicted. It started growing, consuming matter and energy, warping space-time around it. Within an hour, the entire star system had been destroyed, collapsed into a gravity well that was still expanding. The Fold Engine had accidentally created a black hole, and it was still growing, threatening to consume everything within 50 light years. Potentially, if left unchecked, it could grow until it consumed the entire galaxy. Panic spread faster than the singularity. Species that had celebrated their freedom now faced immediate extinction. The Accord of Free Sentience mobilized every ship they had, but nobody knew how to stop a black hole. You couldn't shoot it. You couldn't negotiate with it. You could only watch it grow and hope it eventually stopped on its own. It didn't stop. The singularity's growth accelerated as it consumed more matter. Inhabited systems in its path evacuated, billions of refugees fleeing in whatever ships they could find. But there weren't enough ships, and the black hole was moving too fast. Entire civilizations were going to be erased, not by war or disease, but by a weapon they had built themselves in the name of progress. Aeon commanded the emergency response fleet, trying to buy time for evacuations. His ships established a perimeter around the expanding gravity well, rescuing refugees from doomed worlds. It was desperate work. For every ship they saved, 10 more were lost to the singularity's pull. Dae Young watched whole planets torn apart, populations screaming their last moments into the void. Tae-Young, working with the Accord's leadership, sent urgent messages to the former Council founding species. The Kryn, Orvanti, Velthine, Kor, and Nethrak had retreated to their home systems after losing control of the Council. They had refused all communication with the Accord, bitter about their loss of power. Now, facing potential extinction, Tae-Yang begged them for help. The founding species had fought the architects. They had 40,000 years of advanced research. If anyone knew how to stop this disaster, it would be them. For 3 days, he received no response. The singularity continued growing. More systems fell into it. The death count reached billions, then tens of billions. Then a message finally came from Ambassador Voth. The Kryn would help. So would the Orvanti. But they had conditions. If the Accord survived this crisis, if they somehow stopped the black hole, then every species must agree to destroy any technology capable of reality manipulation. Not restrict it. Not control it. Destroy it completely. The Council's methods had been wrong, but their fear had been justified. This crisis proved it. G-Wu knew what Voth was really asking for. There was only one way to stop a black hole created by folding space. You had to use architect technology, the same reality-manipulating systems that had nearly destroyed the galaxy 40,000 years ago. It existed in fragments, locked away in the founding species' most secure vaults. The technology that could save them was the same technology that the Council had spent 40 millennia preventing anyone from using. It was a test. Use the Forbidden's technology to save the galaxy, but then prove you were responsible enough to destroy it afterward. Fail either part, and everything the architects had feared would come true. Humans would become the next species to threaten existence itself. Premier Haiyan Wu, still leading Earth from underground command centers, called an emergency meeting. Every human leader, every scientist, every military officer who could contribute joined the discussion. They had to decide: accept the founding species' help and the conditions that came with it, or refuse and watch the galaxy die. Hana spoke up first. She had been studying the fragments of architect technology that Ji-Wu had uncovered in the archives. The mathematics were beyond anything humans had developed. Just understanding the equations required thinking in ways that human brains weren't designed for. Several researchers who tried studying architect technology too closely had mental breakdowns. Their minds couldn't handle concepts that contradicted every law of physics they understood. But Hannah thought it could be done. She thought humans could build a device using architect principles, activate it once to collapse the singularity, then destroy the device before anyone was tempted to use it again. It would be dangerous. It would require someone to directly interface with technology that rewrote reality. The person who did it probably wouldn't survive. But it was possible. Di Young volunteered immediately. He was already out there, watching people die by the billions. If there was a way to stop it, even at the cost of his own life, he would do it. That had always been who he was. A man who stood between danger and the people he protected. The decision was made. Humanity would use architect technology. They would save the galaxy. And then, if they survived, they would prove they were responsible enough to destroy the power they had claimed. The entire future of galactic civilization rested on whether humans could be trusted with the power to remake reality itself. Ji-Wu and her team worked without sleep for 5 days. The architect technology fragments came from 3 different founding species, each guarded so carefully that even moving them required diplomatic negotiations. The Kryn provided crystallized data matrices that contained equations written in dimensions humans barely understood. The Orvanti contributed fluid computation cores that changed state based on quantum probability rather than simple on-off switches. The Velfine gave access to their archives showing how the architects had actually built their reality manipulating devices. Putting it all together was like trying to solve a puzzle where the pieces existed in different states of reality simultaneously. Hannah led the engineering team, translating alien mathematics into something human machines could process. 3 more researchers collapsed during the work, their minds unable to handle the contradictions inherent in architect physics. The technology they were building didn't just bend the laws of reality. It rewrote them temporarily, creating localized bubbles where entirely different rules applied. The device took shape in a facility on Luna. It looked wrong, even when you tried not to think about it. Parts of it seemed to flicker in and out of existence. Other sections appeared to be rotating through dimensions that human eyes couldn't fully perceive. Staring at it too long caused headaches and nausea. Several engineers requested transfers to other projects, unable to work near something that violated their fundamental understanding of how the universe functioned. Meanwhile, the singularity continued growing. 70 systems had been consumed. The death toll exceeded 100 billion. Entire species that had just won their freedom from the Council were now extinct, erased by a weapon one of them had built. The irony wasn't lost on anyone. Freedom without responsibility led to extinction, just as surely as oppression did. De Jong brought his fleet back from the evacuation zones. There was no point rescuing more people if they couldn't stop the singularity. Better to focus all resources on the one chance they had. His ships escorted the transport carrying the Architect device, protecting it as it moved toward the growing black hole. The closer they got, the worse the gravitational effects became. Space itself was warped. Light bent at strange angles. Time dilation meant that De Jong's crew aged hours in what appeared to be minutes to outside observers. Ships had to constantly adjust their course as the geometry of space changed around them. They reached the deployment point, close enough to the singularity that they could feel its pull even through the ship's gravity compensators. Hana supervised the installation of the device on a specially designed platform. The Architect technology would have to be activated at exactly the right distance. Too close, and the singularity would destroy it before it could function. Too far, and it wouldn't have enough effect. The device required a human mind to interface with it directly. The architects had designed their technology to be controlled by consciousness rather than simple computers. Someone had to connect their neural patterns to the machine, think in ways that matched the device's reality-bending mathematics, and maintain that connection until the singularity collapsed. Dachi Wu had calculated what would happen to that person. The human brain wasn't designed to think in multiple dimensions simultaneously. Connecting to the device would fundamentally alter the operator's consciousness. They would perceive reality in ways that human biology couldn't sustain. The interface was one way. Consciousness went in, but it never came back out in any form that could be called human. De Jong understood. He had always understood from the moment he volunteered. He recorded a final message for his family, for his crew, for humanity. Then he sat in the interface chair and let the technicians attach the neural connectors. The activation sequence began. De Jong felt his awareness expanding in directions he didn't have words to describe. His perception of time became fluid. He could see past, present, and future as simultaneous events. Space was no longer three-dimensional, but infinite-dimensional, with every point connected to every other point through pathways his previous self had never imagined existed. The singularity wasn't just a collapsed star. It was a wound in reality, a place where the normal rules had been broken so badly they couldn't self-repair. Left alone, it would spread until it consumed everything, turning the entire galaxy into undifferentiated quantum foam. But now De Jong could see how to fix it. The Architect device gave him the ability to impose order on reality itself. He could reach into the singularity and tell it to be something else. Not through force, but through rewriting the fundamental equations that defined what it was. It was tempting. So tempting. With this power, De Jong could do more than just collapse the singularity. He could remake the galaxy into something better. End war. Eliminate disease. Make every species prosperous and happy. The power to reshape existence according to his vision was right there. Available, easy to use. He understood now why the architects had been so dangerous. This technology didn't just give you power. It made you believe you had the right to use it. It whispered that you knew better than everyone else, that your vision of perfection was worth imposing on reality itself. De Jong fought that temptation with everything he had left of his human consciousness. He remembered why humanity had fought the Council. Freedom mattered. Choice mattered. People had the right to live according to their own decisions, even if those decisions were flawed, even if those decisions led to suffering. Imposed perfection was still tyranny, no matter how benevolent the tyrant. He used the absolute minimum intervention required. The singularity was told, at a level deeper than physics, to collapse back to a stable state. Reality bent, twisted, screamed as fundamental laws were temporarily suspended. Then everything snapped back to normal. The black hole was gone, replaced by empty space that would eventually fill with stellar dust and new stars dot in his final moment of consciousness. Dae Jung programmed the architect device to self-destruct. The technology that could have made humanity supreme, that could have given them control over reality itself, turned to quantum static and dispersed into the void. The temptation was destroyed before anyone else could fall to it. Dae Jung's body remained in the interface chair. His heart still beat. His lungs still breathed. But the consciousness that had been Admiral Dae Jung was gone, scattered across dimensions that human minds couldn't visit and return from dot. The galaxy mourned. Over 100 billion beings had died in the crisis, but Dae Jung's sacrifice had saved countless more. Messages of gratitude came from species across the stars. Even the founding species, bitter about losing their council, acknowledged what humanity had done. 3 months later, representatives from 412 species gathered on Luna for a historic meeting. The Accord of Free Sentience needed to evolve. The crisis had proven that complete freedom without any cooperation was dangerous. But the Council's oppressive control had been wrong too. They needed something between the extremes. Su Jin proposed a new framework. Species would remain independent and free to govern themselves. But certain technologies, once proven to threaten existence itself, would be subject to collective oversight, not controlled by a few founding species, but regulated by all species working together. Any civilization that wanted to research dangerous technologies would share their work openly, allowing others to verify safety and contribute expertise. It wasn't perfect. There would be arguments about which technologies were dangerous enough to require oversight. Some species would probably cheat, researching in secret what they had agreed to share. But it was better than the Council's totalitarian control, and better than the chaos that had almost destroyed them all. The founding species, represented by Ambassador Voth and Councillor Thum, attended the meeting. They didn't apologize for 40,000 years of oppression, but they admitted their methods had been wrong. Control through fear and suppression had seemed necessary after the architects nearly destroyed everything. But humanity had shown there were other ways that respected freedom while still maintaining responsibility. The vote was unanimous. The Accord of Free Sentience would become the galactic standard for cooperation. No forced membership, no hidden control mechanisms, just voluntary cooperation between civilizations that recognized they shared one galaxy and had to figure out how to live in it together. Premier Haiyan Wu gave the closing speech at the assembly. He stood before representatives from hundreds of worlds and spoke simply. We broke the old system because it was wrong. We didn't replace it with chaos or with new tyranny. We replaced it with choice. That's humanity's gift to the galaxy. Not freedom from consequences, but freedom to choose what we become. Back on Earth, reconstruction continued. Billions of humans were still living underground, but they had started returning to the surface. Cities were being rebuilt. Children who had been born in shelters during the war were seeing sunlight for the first time. The planet would bear scars for generations, but it would heal. Taeyang returned to what remained of New Jeju. The Council had abandoned it after the war, leaving the world and its resources to humanity. He stood in the ruins of his former office, looking up at a sky free from enforcer ships. His colony could rebuild now, develop according to their own choices. Without Council advisors watching every decision. Hannah continued her research, but with new focus. Instead of developing weapons or escape technologies, she worked on systems to detect dangerous research before it became existential threats. Her early warning networks would give the galaxy time to respond to potential crises, time to offer help and guidance rather than having to destroy entire civilizations. Ji Wu created the Archive of Cautionary Knowledge. It was a database containing everything humanity had learned about the Council, the architects, and the balance between freedom and responsibility. Every species in the Accord had access. The archive included De Young's final message, recorded before he connected to the architect device. His words became required study for anyone researching potentially dangerous technologies. Power doesn't corrupt, De Young had said. Isolation corrupts. When you have power and nobody to share it with, nobody to question your choices, that's when you become dangerous. Share what you know. Accept advice even when it's uncomfortable. Remember that being able to do something doesn't mean you should do it. The galaxy moved forward. There were still conflicts. There were still disagreements. Some species prospered while others struggled. The freedom humanity had fought for didn't solve every problem, but it gave everyone the chance to solve their own problems, to make their own mistakes, to learn and grow without someone else deciding their limits. Earth's influence grew not through military power or technological superiority. It grew through example. When other species faced difficult choices, they looked at what humanity had done. They saw a civilization that had been offered the power to remake reality and chose instead to preserve freedom. They saw people who valued choice over control, even when control would have been easier. 50 years after the Council's fall, Su Jin attended a memorial service for Di Yung. He had no grave. His consciousness had dispersed across dimensions that humans would never visit. But humanity built a monument on Luna, a simple stone with his name and a single sentence. He chose freedom over power. Standing before that monument, surrounded by representatives from 1,000 worlds, Su Jin spoke for all of them. We are not perfect. We never will be. But we are free to try, to fail, to learn, and to try again. That's what De Yung died to preserve. Not perfection, but possibility. The galaxy had changed. Humanity had entered the game the Council created and rewritten the rules. Not through conquest or domination, but through sacrifice and principle. The Galactic Council had tried to control humanity. Instead, humanity had freed the galaxy and taught it a better way to live.